and welcome to Viewpoint. I'm joined today by Jean-Noel Wetterwarld. He's the head of operations for UNHCR Ukraine, the UN's refugee agency. Jean-Noel, many thanks for joining us.
Good morning.
You're actually on your last day today of your posting here at UNHCR Ukraine, so it's a very good time to have you here. You can tell us a little bit about your experience of the past 6 months here in Ukraine. The best place to start, I think, is probably from the news that UNHCR has once again, if I'm understanding correctly, you've given access to Russian-backed militant-controlled territory in East Ukraine. You've been able to deliver humanitarian aid on the other side of the front line, non-government-controlled areas. Tell us a little bit more about how that came about and what is the situation on that side of the line.
Let me start by saying that I'm very sad to leave this wonderful country, but on the other hand, very happy to leave with this breakthrough for the UN. Let me say that there are other agencies delivering humanitarian aid on the other side, but it's the first time we were able to resume delivery of very much needed assistance for winter in Lugansk. There was a long negotiation process, but eventually we are allowed to work.
Because had you been able to work there previously, is that right? And then there'd been a break?
Yes, that's correct. There has been a break. There was all kind of negotiation and obstacles put on the delivery of humanitarian aid. What concerns me and concerns us is, of course, that this delivery comes at a very late moment and a very delicate period of the year, because there are still many people living in very difficult conditions who are in need of building and shelter material.
Yes, and this is obviously coming just before we get into the coldest months of the year.
So yes,
it's crucial.
Extremely concerned. I met myself with elderly ladies, 8 years old, living in conditions which are hard to believe in Europe at the 21st century. They survived World War II, and we hope they will survive the winter here.
It's really quite unbelievable that actually you draw that comparison even to World War II. Just the fact of bringing that to mind obviously brings home to us, I think, the level of the humanitarian situation there. It occurs to me that you say there's been this long process of negotiations. I think perhaps what we're seeing there is the politicization of the aid process. Now, I mean, I don't know what you think, but I think humanitarian aid ideally should be above all of that. But what we've seen several Russian convoys come into East Ukraine from the other side of the border. And obviously those have been very politicized, because the Ukrainian government has often condemned those as saying that they carry weapons. Is that part of the reason why your own convoys have had such a difficulty getting into that area, because of this political battle which has come about?
I mean, there is something we should avoid to do, is to speculate. The fact is that we have been prevented from delivering aid for the last 3 months. And when we are saying we have been prevented, of course, we were subjected to conditions which were difficult for us to accept. But you are so right in saying that the humanitarian imperative is above all the conditions that are set. And it's also important to say that there is a commercial embargo against the territories. And this embargo, it's not for me to say, it's good or bad, but has very bad humanitarian effects. And we, as a UN agency, we have always advocated for the freedom of movement. I mean, you have to go and cross the line to see people waiting, even in sub-freezing temperature the whole night, in order to cross the line.
So you're talking about here is the fact that from Ukrainian government-controlled territory, goods, medical supplies are not getting through because the Ukrainian government has set up a series of permits, checkpoints, trying to control movement between the two. And it's come under a lot of criticism for this, actually, for the humanitarian situation.
Indeed, from a humanitarian point of view, this has very perverse effects, preventing people from reunifying. You have split families. It takes days for people to reunite. And as I said, even if we have to say that from this side, there are a lot of efforts being made to improve this situation, yet there is still a commercial embargo and all kinds of obstacles being put for the freedom of movement.
Jean-Noel, I wanted to change tack slightly. On a related note, though, for some people from East Ukraine, what they've decided to do is just to leave the conflict zone entirely.
Yes.
These people are known as internally displaced persons, IDPs.
Yes.
Their number is estimated perhaps around 1.5 million, 2 million even. Is that accurate?
The government speaks about 1.5 million. Now we know that some people moved and there is double, triple registration. Yet, whatever problems we are encountering in the numbers is still a staggering number.
Staggering number. And these people are now spread throughout Ukraine. Some have managed to go abroad. It's a problem which I believe some analysts say that the Ukraine has not really acknowledged properly, and the response from the Ukrainian government has not been as good as it could be. Perhaps you could tell us a little bit about your experience of what you've seen being down there on the front line, helping these people.
Yes, I have been in other IDP operations, and in particular I was in Colombia, where the numbers were even much, much higher. And what I see, of course, is a lot of goodwill in order to address the issue.
From volunteers?
From volunteers, I must say the response of the civil society is remarkable. They would deserve a prize, a peace prize or whatever prize for their collective response. From the government side, there is also a lot of goodwill, but the response is fragmented, which is not unsurprisingly so, because the response to an IDP crisis is by definition multi-sectorial. You have health problems, you have education problems, you have social problems, and therefore you need a very strong coordinating government body to coordinate this response. And in Colombia, it took the government 4 or 5 years to establish an agency which was responding directly to the president and then coordinating the ministries. I hope, first of all, that the situation will not last for that long, but if this situation is lasting, it's clear that there is still some efforts to do on the coordination level at, with the government.
And do you feel, is that an attempt by the Ukrainian government to sort of downplay the scale of the situation, to try to make it seem as if actually there isn't any major problem here with IDPs? Is that why they have not taken steps to make it more official?
Yeah, I think, again, it's not for us to speculate. What we see is, you're talking about 1.5 million IDPs. People expect IDP camps. They expect a nightmarish humanitarian crisis. But most of these people have been absorbed by the society and have been helped by these national and organizations. So the crisis is not so visible countrywide. Where the crisis is visible and their situation, people are really in a dire situation, is at the front line and what we call the gray zone, in between the two lines, where they don't have the help of anybody. And the good news is that since 1st of September, the ceasefire is more or less holding, even though recently you could see that the violations were increasing. But the bad news is that people return in unsafe conditions and the number of casualties due to mines or unexploded ordnance is shooting up. So you see, good news come with new challenges, and you need flexibility to respond to those.
Jean-Noel, we'll have to end it there, I'm afraid. It's a good note to end. Some good news, some bad news. I think that sums up the situation quite well. So many, many thanks for joining us here in the studio.
Thank you for inviting me.
You've been watching Viewpoint. I've been joined by Jean-Noel Wetterwarld, the head of the UNHCR Ukraine. That's all we have time for today. Join us again for another edition.